and clearly was not as well as Paul Newman I knew. And at the end of this recording session, he said, "Now, George, I've got to go down to my car, which is parked somewhere on Broadway in New York." So I went down with him to make sure he got into his car. It was a very hot summer day, and traffic was backed way up on Broadway, and the sidewalks were overflowing. Paul said, "George, follow me." He walked straight up Broadway into the traffic. Every truck driver got out of their cab, applauded him on the spot, and this loud cheer went up Broadway as Paul Newman left the recording studio with the recording you will hear now. Thank you.
Again, the thing that really hit me was how clean those Rovers look. It's been 5.5 years. Let me tell you a little bit about how's it? It's cutting in and out now. Let me say a little bit about how that film was made, at least from my own perspective. The genesis of that film actually began with my little brother. My younger brother, Tim Squyres, is a very well-known film editor. He's worked with many famous directors, including Ang Lee, Robert Altman, and George Butler. And Tim was working with George on one of his why don't I just yell? Let's just turn this off. Tim was working with George on one of his Shackleton films at the time, and mentioned one day, I guess they were in the editing room, that his brother was working on a Mars project, and that rovers were going to carry cameras with IMAX quality capability to the surface of Mars. George immediately recognized the opportunity this presented. Tim, my brother, arranged a meeting between George and me. We sat down together at George's home in New York. I told George about the rovers. George told me about IMAX. And what I began to realize was that IMAX was the right medium for telling our story. It is an incredibly visual medium. Our cameras could really deliver IMAX quality images, and George decided to go off and get the movie made. Now, one of the things that I realized watching George in action is that getting movies made is sort of like sending missions to Mars. You've got to be relentless about trying to round up the funding to make it happen. There are way, way, way more good ideas for movies than there are actual movies that get made. Same as Mars missions. And George worked and worked and worked, and he finally managed to round up the funding to make the film. Now, at the time that Disney, that's okay, I'm just going to yell. Oh, the video. It's always the media, right? There we go. All right. Now, at the time George got funding, we were at the Cape. We were already at Cape Canaveral. And we were, as you saw in the film, we were way, way, way behind schedule. Whether or not we were going to make it to the launch pad, pretty much in question. So we're working these long shifts. Everybody's worn out. Everybody's exhausted. And these movie guys show up. And they got a truck, and they got a crane, and they got a camera the size of a washing machine, and they want to come in and start filming us as we're doing this stuff. And everybody on the project was a little nervous about this. It's not like we can do some test and then have the director say, "Oh, we didn't quite get that. Could we get another take, please?" Okay. George was very good about it. They came in, real fly-on-the-wall stuff, didn't interfere with our testing at all, but still everybody on the project was a little queasy about it. And then George, this is where George really showed his true brilliance, I think. He shot what must have been, 6 or 7 minutes of really good stuff at the Cape, some of the stuff that you saw with that beautiful spacecraft at Cape Canaveral. And then for the Spirit launch, still much yet to happen on the project. For the Spirit launch, of course, the whole project team was down there. We all had our families down there. George rented out the IMAX theater at Cape Canaveral, at Kennedy Space Center. Screened his Shackleton film, and invited the whole project team to come. And then he showed us, with a nice music soundtrack, about 6 minutes of IMAX footage of our spacecraft as it had looked in the high bay at Cape Canaveral, really just weeks before. And I remember when that first image of the spacecraft came up, 5 stories high, you could just feel this chill go through the audience. And after that, George got all the access he needed. The film tells the story wonderfully, so I don't need to tell the story of the rovers up to the end of the film. One point that I do want to make about the film has to do with that magnificent animation, the digital animation that you saw by Dan Moss, and the wonderful blending of animation and real MER images. The accuracy with which Dan depicted what happened to our vehicles is just, to me, still staggering. Just as one example, as our vehicles were going through the landing process, inside those airbags, plummeting towards the surface and bouncing on the surface, we had accelerometers and gyros running. Those produced very detailed data on all the motions that the vehicle took place. What you see in the film is bounce for bounce, exactly what the vehicles did. There's no Hollywood gimmickry there. It's exactly what the vehicles did. Every single bounce is as it happened on Mars. The story, of course, has continued since the end of the film. The film, I guess, came out, what, 4 years ago now? 3 or 4 years ago now? And the rovers are still going. Spirit and Opportunity are both doing fine. Spirit's bogged down at the moment. We have high hopes of getting her unstuck starting in the next week or two. Spirit has gone on to make many more discoveries than are mentioned in this film, probably the most exciting one being discovery of very, very pure silica deposits in the soil, of the sort that one might find in a hot spring or hydrothermal environment. That was a big, exciting discovery for us, made 1,200 days into what was supposed to be a 90-day mission. Opportunity, let's see, Spirit has gone more than 7 kilometers over its lifetime. That's against a goal of 600 meters when we designed them. And Opportunity just topped out over 17 kilometers and is still going. And 2 nights ago, Opportunity rolled up to a rock that we had named Block Island, and I'm like 99.5% certain, I should be totally certain by tomorrow, that it's an iron meteorite, the 4th one that we found on Mars. And the interesting thing about this one is it's got a really kind of rotten, eroded, weathered texture to it, and we're hoping it'll tell us something about weathering processes and water on Mars. So stay tuned on that one. Anyway, thanks very much. George? I guess we can take questions now.
Right here, if you can speak up so we can hear you.
What about the so-called Rotini that was discovered by, I think it was the spherical back thing. It kind of looks like a fossil.
The feature that I think you're talking about was actually discovered in an image taken by Opportunity very early in its mission with a microscopic imager, and it was right down at the limit of resolution of that camera. If you look down at the resolution, right down at the limit of resolution of our cameras, and it doesn't matter whether it's PanCam, NavCam, HazCam, microscopic imager, take your pick. You go right down to the resolution limit, and you can see all sorts of very, very strange things. I've seen iguanas in our pictures. I've seen all kinds of stuff. That was, you can't tell. There's just no way to tell at that resolution. It was probably just an interesting set of lumps in the rock. Nothing more. We'll do our best to repeat the questions, yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
Sir.
The film didn't tell me how the spacecraft managed to land on its feet.
How does the spacecraft manage to land right side up? If you notice, the shape of the lander is tetrahedral. It's a 3-sided pyramid, okay? So it can land on any one of 4 sides. If it lands right side up on what we call the base petal, then those petals open up, and there's the rover right inside. But it can land on any one of those 4 sides. And if it lands on one of its sides, the motors that open the petals up have enough torque that the vehicle sets itself upright. So it's a self-righting vehicle. You can land on any one of the sides. Spirit landed on its base petal, opened up just fine. Opportunity landed on one of the side petals and flipped itself upright.
Lady right here, blue shirt.
Stuck in the sand?
Yeah, Spirit is stuck in some, it's not sand. If it were sand, we would have gotten out by now. Spirit is stuck in some very, very strange soil.